Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be finishing up our series on the Airbus A320 V2 with a happy little landing. Or will we? We'll find out. So getting started today, we've done everything. If you've been following along so far, you've probably done a little bit of the flight, dialed in the waypoints, kind of fiddled with the handles, sort of played with everything, and now we're finally getting ready to put this thing down on the ground. Now, of course, I have a little surprise, but I don't want to ruin it, because that'll just be fun for later. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and get everything ready for landing. So right now we're heading into Bradley International Airport. We'll zoom in just a little bit so you can get a better look of what's going on here. And you can see we're coming up on Briss. And essentially what we have to do is we have to do a procedure turn and basically snap this thing around and land. We're going to be doing runway 24 today. So there's a couple different things we need to confirm before we start the landing process in this aircraft. So what I'm going to do is head down to my little MCDU, my flight management system for the Boeing folks like myself. And you'll notice if I come down here, there's going to be a couple different buttons. One of which, of course, is going to be my destination under the flight plan page. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and click the button next to it. Now, one of the things you'll see in the upper right corner is this button that says Arrival. Now, if I hit that button, you can see right now we have ILS Approach 24 selected. Now, let's say we're cruising around and we're not 100% sure, what the weather is like at Bradley. Of course, we can always check the ATIS, but one of the fun little tricks we have in this aircraft, which I think is kind of fun, is if you actually go over here, one of the things we can do is dial in the airport itself, and we can actually find what the weather's like. So if I come in here and hit KBDL and press search, it'll say refreshing. It's the 290 at 5 knots. So yes, we did pick the correct runway today. Just kind of a fun little feature. I don't know. I think to me that's cool, but not all of them have fun little buttons like that. So we're going to be using ILS 24. Now the thing you'll notice here is it's already pre-selected. So if I were to come in here and hit this button again, it'll ask me, did you want to change this? What transition did you want to pick? Kind of a thing like that. So if I come over here and I say I don't actually want to use one, it's going to ask what transition. I can hit none, then I can press insert. One of the things you got to watch out for here is you'll notice everything's yellow, which means it's being edited. Until I push this button, nothing is official. So since I've already selected ILS 24, I'm actually going to hit erase here, and it's going to take me back. And if you look down here, you'll see that nothing bad has happened to my actual flight plan here, which is desirable. Next thing we need to do is we need to get the performance set up. But one of the things I noticed looking over here is this is flashing at me. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go ahead and push that in. And I'm going to go ahead and dial in the local altimeter pressure, getting that ready. You also notice my aircraft is in this falling out of the sky sort of descent. This is when, of course, you use a high cost index. And as we set up last time, it's basically making its way down to its altitude. When we cross 10,000 feet, of course, we're going to have to make sure we flip on the landing lights. But as it stands, we're actually doing a pretty darn good job of descending on our own here. Another really good thing to do during descent is you can actually turn on the terrain. Terrain is interesting. And this, the radar, it's the reason I say it's interesting is because some of the stuff you see, you wouldn't be able to see in the real world, and some of the stuff you can't see, you can't. But that's okay. This would definitely be something for a different video from another day kind of deal. But it is kind of nice to have when you're doing landing approaches. Next, of course, we have a couple last little minute things we have to do. So I'm going to make my way down to the perf page. Go ahead and pop that. And this is where we're going to be able to design our approach and basically tell the computer how we want to approach it. So if I go to next phase down here, I can go ahead and hit that. And now I can go ahead and dial in my critical features. One thing it's going to be looking for is my QNH. If I turn my head here, if you remember, the QNH here is 2980. So I can just come right on in here and pop that in just like that. Up, just like that. It's going to ask me for a temp. I can actually look right over here and see what my temp is. Let's see here. A few 16 degrees is going to be my... Oh, be careful with the right click, by the way. 16 degrees, just like that. We can go ahead and dial in my magnetic wind. Again, these aren't required, but they are nice. 290 at 5 knots. 90/05. I'm going to go ahead and click right there, dial it in. Looks good to me. Looks good to me. It's going to ask me for my minimums. So we're going to do 200 feet. That's going to be my radio minimums, just like that. It's going to ask me for my landing configuration. We can do 3 or we can do full. If I dive full, it just means I'm all the way back. If I dial in 3, it means I'm going to be using flaps 3. I'm going to be using a full landing today. This is going to be the desirable one. So once this is all squared away, we're pretty much ready to rock. Now, one of the things you'll notice is in a few minutes, we're going to start slowing down very aggressively. Now, the reason it's going to do that is basically we're going to overfly the airport, do a power circle, and then come back in for our landing here. All right, we're slowing down neatly. Once we cross under 10 grand, we can go ahead and put our landing lights out and get them kind of ready to go and all that good stuff. So basically, our approach phase is set. Everything's been dialed in just the way that we need it. One thing we should do is if you go down to rad nav down here, you actually can take a look and see what the ILS selective frequency is. Right now, it's 111.10, which is correct. And you'll also notice our course is 237, which is also correct. So we just want to make sure we got those numbers right. Now, one thing that you can do too, and I find this kind of cool, but there's actually a little mode up here. This is LS. If you click that, it puts on your glide slope kind of your ILS indicators here, and you can see the two sets of triangles basically ready to rock for us in a moment's notice kind of a thing. Now, the thing is, you don't need to leave that on for the system to work, and some people shut it off. The other thing I see from time to time is somebody will do one of these things, which puts it on like super duper ultra ILS mode, but again, it is up to you how you want to approach. I find arc perfectly agreeable. We're slowing down just, it gets so much less windy in this plane. You can also see we've got some nice quality Connecticut turbulence hitting us right now. Nothing new there. I'll go ahead and just close this distraction so I don't have to look at that. All right, delightful. So if you look out the window right now, you can actually see the runway we're going to be landing on. And what I find so wild about this approach is basically we have to go to Massachusetts and go whoops and turn around and come back. The other thing I love too is if you look, you can actually see Barnes Air Force Base. And if you have very good eyes, you can actually see Westover Air Force Base. Twist, twist, twist. It's going to be right over here. So it's actually pretty wild that just like in the real world, you could see these airports at extremely long distances. Springfield proper is actually right in here, which again, right up here would be Westover, which is, it's a big airport. And if you have amazingly good eyes and you look at your left here, you might be able to actually see Simsbury Airport. That's going to be hard to see, though. The thing is tiny. There's the Congamon Lakes. Doing the tour guide thing as the airplane is slowing down. Time to put down the landing lights. Go snap those things on. We'll go ahead and push these switches. Go ahead and set that to the takeoff position. Good thing to make sure everything's good. Go ahead and flash the seatbelt sign. Let everybody around you know that everything's good to go. Looks pretty solid to me. Like I said, we've dropped under that 10,000 foot point. Now, since we pre-selected our altitude here, one of the things we have to remember is we absolutely have to make sure we switch the approach mode once we get to the position we need to. Now, if I float down here, you'll also observe that my throttle is still in the climb position, even though the engines have spooled down, because we are in auto throttle mode. If we weren't on auto throttle mode, we could actually grab the throttle and do all sorts of fun things. Lastly, and this is going to confuse you to death, you reverse throttle mode. If you pull your throttle, for me, all the way to 0, that's not going to put you in reverse unless you programmed it that way. Now, for people who are interested in programming it that way, if you actually come into your power button, go to options. I'm not going to hit it because I have sensitive numbers on there. There's a button for configure joystick, so I'm going to leave that away. But again, that's where you can configure that for those of you who don't like to hit a button. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let the aircraft basically do a power donut and get us lined up with the runway. One of these days, I'm going to compose a song for procedure turns. I don't know how it's going to go, but procedure turn, how you burn my procedure turn. I don't know. I got to make it work. So one of those things. But hang on. Now, at this stage of our turn, we actually have a lot of little things going on, and I want to make sure you're aware of them as we do them. One of the things you'll observe is on my speed selection, you'll notice 131 is the new selected speed, which means we've got to get ourselves some flaps or some slats. The other thing we need to start thinking about is our braking. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and arm my ground spoilers by pulling that up. And then, of course, we can select our automatic braking. I'm going to go ahead and select on. That works fine. Of course, we can flip on the terrain radar and get a nice look, as well as the local mountains. We should be plenty high enough here. Now, one of the things I find kind of interesting here is our next selected waypoint is called Searle. You'll also notice that we're getting unbelievably slow. So one of the things I'm going to do is actually pull out the speed selector. And I'm going to manually dial into my desired speed because we're getting so slow here. 190 should be plenty. And again, air traffic control is usually going to be the ones that are going to be telling you what to do. You can see at this point now we've got ourselves 2 clicks of flaps and the slats have deployed themselves quite smoothly and we're pretty much ready to get ready. Now, one of the questions I get often is people ask, when is it a good time to go ahead and activate the approach hold? The reality is we can activate the approach selection, again, for the automatic pilot, pretty much any time that we've detected an ILS signal. But as a general warning, I usually tell people you have to be very, very cautious with this because one of the things that'll happen is if we're very low or very high, the airplane's going to come chasing after that glide slope or it'll fly it backwards. So just be mindful. So I'm going to go ahead and flick on LS mode right now. Go ahead and snap to LS mode, put every LS mode on. And you can see we're now going to go ahead and start taking that turn. This little pink line is going to start centering for us in a second. If it bothers you, I can look over here as well so you can kind of see side by side what's going on here. And again, this is going to be our ILS signal. This will no longer be the signal from the computer, basically the GPS or the navigation signal. Now, one of the cool things we have here is that we know everything we need to know for this approach. We're going to get all of our warning. It's going to yell at us for landing gear, and there it is. You can see we've captured the localizer. I'm going to press the APPR button. Now, this is important. Once you push that button, the party starts. So you can hear our engines making all sorts of funny noises here. It's expecting us to speed up. It's expecting us to slow down. And I'm going to go ahead and slow us down to our approach speed here. Go ahead and do that. Get my next click of flaps. Once we slow down to 180. Ready? Slow down a little more. And what I'm doing now is I'm keeping a very close eye on our glide slope marker. The way we typically do this is we're going to hold this altitude until the glide slope marker appears right here. Once it hits that spot, I like to pop in my last click of flaps as well as my landing gear all at the same time. We're getting a little slow, but that's okay. Bring in that last click of flaps a little early here. Come down, check my performance real fast. We're going to take a look at my approach speed. Looks good to me, 131. We could do 136. It's probably just a little bit safer there. Give us a little bit of a buffer. There's the engine spooling up again, and one notch of glide. We're going to slap down the landing gear. Now we're going to pull down our last click of flaps, and you can see this aircraft gets very, very dirty very, very quickly. Gear coming down. We have the flaps pulling themselves all the way out, and we're just about to intercept the glide slope nice and smoothly. Now, looking out the window here, you can see we have one heck of a nasty, nasty, nasty situation here as far as crosswind goes. Sometimes that happens. Again, that's part of the fun. So let's go ahead and do our idiot checks here. I love the fact it tells me what to do. We'll be told in a minute whether or not it's ready. Landing light is on. Signs are good. Cabin, spoilers, arm, flaps full. Click, 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 click. Everything's ready. Our speed is good. I've got my hands on the controls. I'm ready to go. This looks like it's going to be a nice and relaxing landing. Aren't these Airbuses great? I will say, coming from a Boeing land here, I do respect the fact that you don't have to fiddle with the trim. It definitely makes my life a little easier. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of the magic of acceleration here. And you can see it's just steady, just cruising along, doing its thing. Everybody's looking very, very good. It's a nice, relaxing day. I need to come out of time acceleration in a second here. Otherwise, we're going to have a really bad accident. There's my 1,000, TA only. Looks good, looks good. We'll go give it a couple more clicks there. Swing us back. We have a landing inhibit. There we are, about 600 feet, 600 feet. Got my hands ready to take over for the last part of the landing, which is the important part. Go around. So what we're going to do in a go-around with this aircraft is we have to do a lot of things very, 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 very quickly. You're going to get a bunch of warnings. You're going to get a thing that's going to tell you that your automatic pilot is off. You can go and clear that warn. If you really, really, really need to clear it, kind of a thing like that, so we can go ahead and push a couple of the buttons. The important thing, when you do choose to go ahead and clear like that, you just have to respect the fact it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. You do have to respect the fact that you want to get your flaps about 2 clicks in, and you want to also make sure that when you are ready to go around, that you do it immediately. So one of the cool things with this one is because I slammed the throttle all the way forward, it immediately clicked in go around mode, and you'll actually notice that the system automatically swung back over to the appropriate autopilot mode. So basically we're at full blast. It's yelling at me to go lever climb now. One of the things you have to remember though, is let me go ahead and pull this to my standard one here. Go ahead and switch to manually, basically, is you'll probably observe that I set an altitude limit of 2100, and the Toga did not care. It blew right through that altitude constraint, even though I had the automatic pilot enabled. That's one of those things that you have to be mindful of. And one of the things you actually find kind of interesting. So if you go to my flight plan, you'll notice that 11,000 is considered to be, actually 4,000 is the expected climb altitude. And unless I stick my hand in here and basically start fiddling with those things, it's not going to do that. So let's go ahead and pop off the autopilot there. It's going to go ahead and scream at us one more time to tell me that it did it. And now we're in control of the plane. I'm going to go ahead and bring us around for a manual landing. All right, let's do it. So one of the things that makes this aircraft exceptionally challenging to land is not the fact that it's got a fly-by-wire system. It's the throttle. Now, one of the things you'll hear is I give it the most gentle tap, and before you know it, you're doing 150 knots. You didn't even try to do 150 knots. It just spiked up. Because of the way they chose to program the throttle, you will frequently find yourself going from no throttle to half throttle to full throttle to full throttle to no throttle. One of the suggestions I can make to that effect is it's much easier to leave auto thrust on. One of the things I like to do is listen for the click of the throttle. So if you listen really carefully, you hear that little kind of a thing? That's going to be your acoustic hint, the fact that you have now disengaged the throttle. You will find this thing very, 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 very tricky to land because of the fact that there's that kind of dead space you get because of the way the designers chose to emulate the real throttle action. Now, had you done things where you did it like the full motion with the reverse and everything, it would actually be very easy to use. But because of that little catch, it's always going to be making you slightly insane. You'll know what I mean. The other thing we can do too is I'll go ahead and give it just a little bit of power. And again, I push my throttle forward maybe a millimeter. And you can hear that that gets me just a little bit of RPM. So it really becomes almost an acoustic thing for engine than it is look over on my right and try to see exactly what particular power I am. So I've got about 140. I'll pull the throttle back a little tiny bit. And again, just listen for the pitch of the engines. That's your clue what it's doing. Now we've got ourselves a pretty nasty wind here. This is not pleasant.
400.
A little low, but not terrible. A little fast, but not bad. A little fast. Just going to pull the nose up a little bit. Now notice that click. There we are. And you can see it does that nice little lift there. Sounds like a late effect. Woo! Windy. There we go. A little fast. We'll go ahead and pull that to idle.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5.
Nice. Go ahead and put a little bit of aileron down. Go ahead and hold on reverse, reverse. It's a very mellow reverse, I'm not going to lie. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm reversing, I'm reversing. Under 80, we'll go ahead and clean that out. Whoa, had to earn that one. So as you can see, the Airbus is a very, very solid aircraft. I find that a lot of what makes it work so well is really leaving it as automated as possible at all time. The moment you start shutting some of that automation off, it's not that you'll find yourself fighting it. It's just that you're going to have to kind of almost relearn a lot of those sort of landing instincts that you're probably typical using there. Another thing you probably see is because of the way that throttle works, you really got to use your ears for the throttle more than you can use, the traditional check the RPM or something like that, because it's difficult to feel on your joystick exactly what the throttle is doing. Other than that, enjoy.